What if the greatest battles in your life aren't coming from strangers, but from the people closest to you? The smiles you trust, the voices you rely on, the ones you call family and friends. What if some of them are silently draining your energy, planting doubt, and pulling you away from your purpose? This isn't about fear or paranoia, it's about awareness. Because not every presence in your life is sent to build you. Some are there to test you, distract you, and break you from within. Today we're going to uncover the subtle signs, the hidden behaviors, and the spiritual and emotional red flags that reveal when someone around you is carrying darkness instead of light, and how you can protect your peace before it's too late. Constant negativity and discouragement don't always appear in loud, obvious ways. Sometimes it's subtle, wrapped in jokes, disguised as honesty, or presented as concern. These are the people who consistently highlight what's wrong instead of what's possible. When you share an idea, they immediately point out why it won't work. When you celebrate progress, they downplay it or shift the focus to something lacking. Over time, this pattern begins to shape your thinking. What once felt like excitement slowly turns into hesitation, and confidence gets replaced by doubt. Negativity, when it becomes a habit, creates an environment where growth struggles to survive. You may notice that after spending time with such individuals, your energy feels drained, your motivation drops, and even the goals you were once passionate about start to feel distant or unrealistic. This isn't accidental. Words carry weight, and repeated exposure to discouraging language can quietly influence your mindset. It plants seeds of limitation, making you question your abilities before you even take action. Another sign is how they respond to challenges in your life. Instead of offering support or constructive guidance, they amplify the problem. They might say things like, "I knew this would happen," or "That's just how things are for people like us." These statements reinforce a fixed, powerless perspective. Rather than helping you find solutions, they anchor you in the problem, making it harder to move forward. Over time, you may even start adopting this outlook yourself, seeing obstacles as permanent rather than temporary. It's also important to notice the consistency of this behavior. Everyone has negative moments, bad days, stress, frustration. That's normal. But when negativity becomes someone's default mode, it's a different story. If almost every interaction leaves you feeling smaller, discouraged, or uncertain, it's a pattern worth paying attention to. This kind of influence doesn't just affect your mood, it shapes your direction in life. The more you internalize it, the more it limits your willingness to take risks, try new things, or believe in your potential. Sometimes discouragement comes disguised as protection. They may claim they're just being realistic or trying to save you from disappointment. While realism has its place, constant discouragement isn't guidance, it's limitation. True support acknowledges risks but still encourages growth. It helps you prepare, not retreat. When someone repeatedly pushes you to play small under the guise of care, it's important to question whether their words are truly about your well-being or their own fears being projected onto you. Recognizing this pattern is the first step toward protecting your mental and emotional space. You don't need to confront every negative comment or cut people off immediately, but you do need to become aware of how their words affect you. Start by observing your own reactions. Do you feel inspired after talking to them, or do you feel drained? Do they challenge you to grow, or do they subtly convince you to settle? These reflections help you separate supportive voices from limiting ones. Protecting yourself also means setting internal boundaries. Not every opinion deserves equal weight. You can listen without absorbing. You can hear their doubts without making them your truth. Strength comes from choosing which voices you allow to shape your mindset. Surrounding yourself with more positive, growth-oriented influences, whether through people, books, or content, can gradually shift your perspective back toward possibility. In the end, constant negativity and discouragement are less about labeling others and more about understanding impact. The goal isn't to see people as bad, but to recognize patterns that hinder your growth. Awareness gives you the power to respond differently, to guard your energy, to stay aligned with your purpose, and to keep moving forward even when doubt tries to creep in from the outside. Manipulation and control tactics rarely show up in obvious, dramatic ways at first. In fact, the most effective manipulation is often quiet, subtle, and wrapped in familiarity. It can come from people you trust, friends, family members, or those who seem to have your best interests at heart. But over time, you start to notice something feels off. Your decisions don't fully feel like your own anymore, and you begin second-guessing yourself more than usual. That's often where it begins, not with control, but with confusion. One of the most common signs of manipulation is guilt. A person who uses control tactics will often make you feel bad for setting boundaries or choosing something that benefits you. They may say things like, "After everything I've done for you," or "You've changed." These statements are designed to make you question your choices and feel responsible for their emotions. Instead of respecting your independence, they try to pull you back into a position where they can influence your actions. Over time, this can create a cycle where you prioritize their approval over your own needs. Another powerful tactic is gaslighting, when someone makes you doubt your own perception of reality. You might clearly remember something happening a certain way, but they'll deny it or twist the narrative until you feel uncertain. They may say, "That never happened," or "You're overreacting." At first, it seems like a simple disagreement, but repeated over time, it chips away at your confidence. You begin to rely on them to define what's true, which gives them even more control over how you think and feel. Manipulative people also tend to control through inconsistency. One moment they're supportive and kind, and the next they're distant or critical. This unpredictability keeps you emotionally off balance. You start working harder to please them, hoping to get back to the version of them that feels safe and approving. This creates a subtle dependency where your sense of stability becomes tied to their behavior. It's not genuine connection, it's emotional conditioning. Another red flag is when someone tries to isolate you from others. They may criticize your friends, question your relationships, or make you feel like no one else understands you the way they do. This isn't about protecting you, it's about limiting your perspective. The fewer voices you have around you, the easier it becomes for them to shape your thinking. Healthy relationships encourage connection and independence, not isolation. Control can also show up in decision-making. They may subtly pressure you into choices that benefit them, even if it doesn't feel right to you. It might sound like advice, but it carries an underlying expectation. If you don't follow it, they may react with disappointment, frustration, or withdrawal. Over time, you may find yourself making decisions based on how they'll respond rather than what you truly want. That's a clear sign that control has replaced support. It's important to understand that manipulation isn't always intentional in a malicious way. Some people develop these behaviors out of insecurity, fear, or learned patterns. But regardless of the reason, the impact remains the same. It limits your freedom, weakens your confidence, and shifts power away from you. Recognizing this isn't about blaming others, it's about reclaiming your sense of self. Breaking free from manipulation starts with awareness. Pay attention to how you feel after interactions. Do you feel empowered, or do you feel pressured and uncertain? Do your choices reflect your own values, or are they shaped by someone else's expectations? These questions help you reconnect with your own voice. Setting boundaries is the next step. This doesn't have to be aggressive or confrontational. It can be as simple as saying no without over-explaining, or taking time to make decisions without external pressure. You have the right to think, feel, and choose for yourself. The more you practice this, the stronger your sense of independence becomes. In the end, manipulation and control lose their power when you stop responding to them unconsciously. When you become aware of the patterns, trust your instincts, and stand firm in your decisions, you take that power back. And once you do, you begin to rebuild something far more important than control. You rebuild your clarity, your confidence, and your freedom. Lack of empathy or genuine care isn't always loud or obvious. It often shows up in the quiet moments where understanding should exist but doesn't. It's in the way someone responds when you're going through something difficult. You open up, maybe not even asking for solutions, just hoping to feel heard, and instead you're met with indifference, impatience, or a response that feels shallow. That moment tells you more than words ever could, because empathy isn't about fixing problems, it's about being present in them. At first, you might brush it off. You tell yourself maybe they're busy, distracted, or just not good with emotions. But over time, a pattern begins to form. Every time you express vulnerability, the response feels distant or self-centered. They might redirect the conversation back to themselves, minimize what you're feeling, or offer cold, surface-level reactions like "you'll be fine," without really listening. It creates a silent gap between you and them, a space where connection should be, but isn't. One of the clearest signs of a lack of empathy is when your emotions are consistently invalidated. You might hear things like, "You're overreacting," "It's not that serious," or other people have it worse. These statements don't just dismiss your feelings, they train you to question whether your emotions are even valid. Over time, you may start holding things in, choosing silence over expression because you expect not to be understood anyway. That's how emotional distance quietly grows. Another aspect is how they react to your successes. Genuine care isn't just about being there during hard times, it's also about celebrating the good moments with you. When someone lacks empathy, your wins might be ignored, downplayed, or even met with subtle discomfort. Instead of sharing your excitement, they might change the subject or respond in a way that feels forced. It's not always jealousy, it's often an inability to emotionally connect with experiences that aren't their own. You'll also notice it in how they treat others, not just you. Empathy is a consistent trait, not something that appears selectively. Pay attention to how they respond to people in vulnerable situations. Are they compassionate or are they quick to judge and criticize? Do they try to understand different perspectives or do they dismiss anything that doesn't align with their own view? These behaviors reflect a deeper pattern, one that eventually affects every relationship they're part of. A lack of empathy can make you feel emotionally alone, even when you're not physically alone. You might be surrounded by people, yet still feel like no one truly sees or understands you. That kind of loneliness is heavy because it's not about absence, it's about disconnection. And over time, it can affect how you see yourself. When your feelings are consistently overlooked, you may start believing they don't matter as much as they actually do. It's important to recognize that empathy isn't about perfection. No one gets it right every time. We all have moments where we miss cues or respond imperfectly, but the difference lies in intention and consistency. Someone who genuinely cares will try. They'll listen, they'll ask questions, they'll make an effort to understand even if they don't fully relate. That effort is what builds trust and emotional safety. Protecting yourself from this kind of dynamic starts with awareness. Notice how you feel after sharing something personal. Do you feel lighter, understood, and supported? Or do you feel dismissed, misunderstood, or even regretful for opening up? Your emotional response is a signal. It tells you whether the connection is nurturing or draining. From there, it becomes about choice. You don't have to stop caring about people who lack empathy, but you do need to adjust your expectations and boundaries. Not everyone has the capacity to meet you at the level of emotional depth you need. And that's okay, as long as you don't keep placing yourself in situations where your voice goes unheard. Seek out connections where empathy flows naturally, where you can speak freely without fear of being dismissed, where your emotions are met with understanding instead of judgment. These are the relationships that restore you, that remind you your feelings are valid and that you're not alone in what you experience. In the end, recognizing a lack of empathy isn't about labeling others. It's about honoring your own emotional needs. You deserve to be heard, to be understood, and to feel genuinely cared for. And once you fully accept that, you'll stop settling for anything less. Jealousy of your growth or success doesn't always look like open resentment. In fact, most of the time it hides behind subtle behaviors that are easy to overlook if you're not paying attention. It can come from people who once supported you, cheered for you, and stood beside you until you started evolving, improving, or stepping into something greater. That's when the energy begins to shift. The same people who once encouraged you may start acting distant, less enthusiastic, or quietly critical, and it leaves you wondering what changed. At first, the signs are small. You share good news, something you're proud of, and instead of genuine excitement, you get a muted response. A quick, "that's nice," or a forced smile that doesn't quite reach their eyes. They don't ask questions, don't celebrate with you, and don't match your energy. It's subtle, but you feel it. That moment tells you something important. Your growth is no longer something they're comfortable with. And while they may not say it out loud, their reaction reveals more than words ever could. Jealousy often shows up through comparison. Instead of appreciating your progress, they begin to measure it against themselves. You might hear comments like, "must be nice," or "you're lucky," as if your effort, discipline, and consistency had nothing to do with your success. These statements are not compliments. They're quiet attempts to minimize your journey. They shift the focus away from your hard work and turn it into something undeserved or accidental. Over time, this can make you feel like you have to downplay your achievements just to keep the peace. Another sign is subtle criticism disguised as advice. They might start pointing out flaws in what you're doing, not to help you improve, but to make your progress seem less impressive. It can sound like concern. Are you sure that's a good idea? Or don't get too ahead of yourself. But when this becomes a pattern, it's not guidance. It's discomfort with your growth. Instead of pushing you forward, they try to slow you down, keeping you within a space that feels familiar to them. Jealousy can also create emotional distance. Conversations become shorter, interactions feel different, and the connection you once had starts to fade. It's not always direct or confrontational. It's more like a quiet withdrawal. They may stop showing interest in your life altogether or avoid situations where your progress is visible. This distance isn't random. It often comes from an internal struggle they're having, one where your growth forces them to confront their own lack of movement or unfulfilled goals. In some cases, it goes even deeper. Instead of just pulling away, they may start subtly undermining you. This could be through backhanded compliments, spreading doubt, or even speaking negatively about you to others. It's not always obvious, but it's enough to create tension and confusion. You may find yourself questioning whether you're imagining it or overthinking, but your instincts usually pick up on what your mind tries to rationalize. It's important to understand that jealousy is a human emotion. Everyone experiences it at some point, but the difference lies in how it's handled. Healthy individuals recognize it, process it, and still choose to support others. Unhealthy patterns, on the other hand, allow jealousy to shape behavior in ways that damage relationships. When someone consistently reacts to your growth with discomfort, distance, or negativity, it's no longer just a feeling, it's a pattern. Recognizing this dynamic is not about becoming guarded or hiding your success. It's about becoming aware of who can truly celebrate with you and who struggles to. Not everyone will be able to walk with you as you grow, and that's a reality you have to accept. Growth changes you, and it also reveals the true nature of the people around you. Protecting yourself in this situation means staying grounded in your purpose. Don't shrink yourself to make others comfortable. Don't silence your wins or dim your light just to maintain relationships that can't handle your progress. At the same time, you don't need to confront everything aggressively. Sometimes the most powerful response is distance, quietly creating space between you and those who can't align with your growth. Surround yourself with people who are inspired by your journey, not threatened by it. The ones who clap when you win, who encourage you to go further, and who genuinely want to see you succeed. These are the connections that will fuel your growth instead of resisting it. In the end, jealousy of your growth is less about you and more about where the other person stands within themselves. But your responsibility is not to manage their emotions. It's to keep moving forward, because the moment you start shrinking to fit someone else's comfort zone is the moment you stop becoming who you're meant to be. Creating confusion, chaos, or self-doubt is one of the most subtle yet damaging patterns you can experience in close relationships. It doesn't always come through direct conflict or obvious negativity. Instead, it shows up in mixed signals, inconsistent behavior, and conversations that leave you questioning yourself long after they end. One moment, everything feels normal, even supportive, and the next you're left feeling unsure, unsettled, or mentally drained. It's not just what's being said, it's the inconsistency behind it that creates the real impact. You may notice that with these individuals, clarity is always just out of reach. Plans change without explanation, words don't match actions, and promises are often broken or redefined. When you try to address it, the conversation somehow turns back on you. Suddenly, you're the one being questioned. Your memory, your understanding, your reaction. It creates a loop where you're constantly trying to make sense of things, but never quite getting there. Over time, this can lead to deep self-doubt, where you start wondering if the problem is you. A major sign of this pattern is how often you feel mentally exhausted after interacting with them, not because of intense arguments, but because of the subtle tension and lack of stability. You find yourself replaying conversations, analyzing what was said, and trying to decode meanings that should have been clear in the first place. This kind of mental strain builds up slowly. It doesn't hit all at once, but it lingers, quietly affecting your focus, your confidence, and your sense of peace. Another aspect is emotional unpredictability. You never quite know which version of them you're going to get. Some days they're supportive and understanding, and other days they're distant, critical, or dismissive. This inconsistency keeps you off balance. You may start adjusting your behavior, your tone, even your thoughts, just to avoid triggering a negative reaction. It becomes less about being yourself and more about maintaining a fragile sense of stability around them. Confusion also grows when communication lacks honesty or transparency. Instead of clear, direct conversations, everything feels vague or incomplete. Questions are answered indirectly, important details are left out, and intentions remain unclear. This forces you to fill in the gaps, often with assumptions that lead to even more uncertainty. When clarity is consistently missing, trust begins to weaken, not just in the other person, but in your own ability to understand situations accurately. Self-doubt is the natural result of prolonged confusion. When your reality is constantly being questioned or reshaped, you begin to lose confidence in your own judgment. Decisions that once felt simple now feel overwhelming. You hesitate more, question more, and rely less on your instincts. This is where the real damage happens, not in the chaos itself, but in how it changes the way you see yourself. It's important to recognize that not all confusion is intentional, but consistent patterns usually point to deeper issues. Whether it's avoidance, insecurity, or a need for control, the result is the same. You're left carrying the emotional weight of uncertainty, and the longer it continues, the more it affects your sense of stability. Breaking free from this pattern starts with trusting your awareness. If something feels off repeatedly, it's worth paying attention to. You don't need perfect evidence to acknowledge that a dynamic isn't healthy. Your experience is valid. The clarity you're searching for externally often begins internally by recognizing what you're feeling and accepting it without dismissing it. Setting boundaries becomes essential in these situations. This might mean asking for clear communication, taking space when interactions become overwhelming, or choosing not to engage in conversations that leave you more confused than before. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They're about protecting your own mental and emotional space. It also helps to ground yourself in environments and relationships that offer stability and clarity. When you experience consistent, honest communication elsewhere, it becomes easier to recognize how unhealthy confusion feels. You start to recalibrate your sense of what's normal and what's not. In the end, you deserve clarity. You deserve interactions that make sense, conversations that feel real, and relationships that bring peace instead of constant questioning. Confusion, chaos, and self-doubt are not things you have to accept as part of any connection. The moment you begin to choose clarity over confusion is the moment you start reclaiming your confidence, your stability, and your peace of mind.